And tomorrow, jury selection is scheduled to get underway in the federal trial against the president's son, Hunter Biden. He faces 3 charges related to gun possession. Federal prosecutors say the 54-year-old lied about his drug use when he obtained those guns. Hunter Biden has pled not guilty. He was nearing a plea deal on some of those charges. That was back in August. But then a Trump-appointed judge pumped the brakes on it. Here with us is trial attorney Bryan Rotella. Bryan, welcome back. Good morning.
Good morning.
So talk us through what happened to lead us to this point months later.
Well, first of all, Hannah, remember the old movie and the old show, The Odd Couple?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you, there's a really interesting thing this summer. Donald Trump and Hunter Biden are actually the odd couple. Why? These two people are actually going to have trials that are going to rivet the country. One already did. I think this one will as well. All about falsifying business records. So that's not something that we typically see these types of trials these types of cases go to trial for. And specifically, why am I bringing that up? It's all about falsifying business records with an intent to do something that would ultimately impact something big. In the case of Donald Trump, we already know that was about, according to Alvin Bragg, corrupting the 2016 election. Getting to Hunter Biden, and to your question, this whole case is about Hunter Biden allegedly falsifying on a form that he was not a drug addict, which is anytime you buy a gun in this country, there's a federal form where you have to fill that out. He did not put in that he was a drug addict at the time of 2018, and that the reason he did that was to make sure that the gun owner, the owner of the gun shop, would not have any red flags raised and go, maybe I shouldn't sell Hunter Biden the gun. So it all comes down to, again, Groundhog's Day, Hannah, falsifying a business record here, a form that everyone has to fill out anytime you buy a gun, with, in this case, what the prosecutors are saying, Hunter Biden's intent to dupe the gun shop owner to not have any red flags and let him buy the gun. Like I said, there's a lot of overlaps, strangely, in these two cases, and I think we're going to be hearing a lot of the same type of testimony we heard before. It's not all that sexy and interesting about business records as compared to other stuff.
I think you're absolutely right. I think Groundhog's Day is a really good assessment. So what is Hunter Biden's defense team looking for in jurors this week?
Hunter, if I were his defense team, I would be looking for people that you're always looking for, which is that they can be objective, but most importantly, people who may have an understanding of addiction. Hunter Biden's defense in this case, Hannah, is going to be all about, was he actually able to determine at the time that he filled out that form that he was an addict? What's that mean? Well, he had actually just gotten out of a rehab at about 11 days spent in a rehab before he purchased the gun. So what his defense lawyers are saying is, you know, when he filled that out, he didn't think he was an addict. But just recently, that judge who you mentioned in the wind-up to this throughout the plea deal last year, the judge struck down a motion that the defense wanted to say that he actually had to be using the day he bought the gun. The judge said no. She agreed with the prosecutors. He just needed to be in the range in something recent where he had been using. So the defense is going to have to make a case, and they're actually trying to bring in an expert witness. Sound familiar again? Expert witnesses coming up? An expert witness to say, you know, addicts really don't know, and they're in denial, and they don't really know if they're an addict or not when they're filling out that form. Again, these are not the types of false business record cases that typically make their way to trial, and certainly the things that end up in the national news.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.